The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we're going to talk about the big Zardes buyout news that dropped today. We'll also cover what could be a very busy week for MLS clubs and then chat about a few other pieces of Austin FC news. My name's Landon Cottam and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I am Jeremiah Bentley. And Landon, I noticed photos, I don't actually know if I saw you in them, of the Fighting Leslie's boat party from last Wednesday night. So I believe you and Ashley and the Croniolos were there. I think Adrian Healy made an appearance. Like maybe talk about that. But it seemed like a good time with a bunch of cool people. Like talk about that evening.
Yeah, it was great. They Fighting Leslie's have done this the last couple of years. Rented a boat on Lady Bird Lake and just hang out, have some snacks and drinks with some fine soccer folks. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's very cool. A Wednesday night, I was not at the boat party, which I was invited to, and I had another event. But I was in Houston with a dog getting emergency eye surgery. So very different kind of evening.
Yeah, that doesn't sound as much fun.
It was not. So yeah.
This is Poppy, right?
Poppy. Yeah, our 2-year-old corgi on Tuesday night heard something under the deck, went running. That something ended up being a stray cat, which of all the places the stray cat could claw my dog, it was in the eye. Like I'm like, couldn't we have a shoulder injury or something like this? Something that's not quite as traumatic. So we ended up like finding a surgeon in Houston that would see her. Drove to Houston Wednesday, had to leave her overnight, went back and picked her up Thursday. Happy to report that as of right now, and probably going forward, she has 2 eyes and vision in both of them, which is way better than we thought it might turn out. But man, it's just 2 days before, if you'd asked me, do you see yourself driving to Houston for emergency eye surgery for your dog? That would have been very much a no. Like, or would you even think that like you would do something like that? But we had tried in Austin. We tried in Austin, San Antonio, and College Station, and nobody could do it. And so the choice was Houston or nowhere else. And so that's what we did. So yeah, it's been a rough few days. Finally, we're going to get to sleep through the night for the first time because we've been every 4 hours on medication, like regardless of time. But yeah, man, the things we will do for our pets, despite the fact that they're often little jerks.
That's brutal, but I'm glad she's doing okay. I had a dog growing up. I don't remember the order of these. The first 2 major injuries were a broken leg because it was on the bed while my dad was trying to make the bed. And you'll push a dog off of a bed or a couch, and he just gave a little nudge and it fell wrong and broke its leg. And so it had to have surgery on that. It got hit by a car and also lost. It did lose its eye. And so it was quite young when that happened. Ended up getting ragdolled by like a German Shepherd or something at one point and needed surgery for that. And then stuck his head under the neighbor's fence and got his ear bitten off.
Oh my God.
And this dog lived to be over 18 years old, I believe. So
oh my gosh.
I think it made him tougher.
Yeah.
This dog's name was Buttons. So like the least tough name you can have, but maybe the same will happen for Poppy.
Maybe so. What kind of dog was this?
It was a toy poodle.
Oh, wow. Okay, so again, like not a big dog. Like Poppy's like a 20-pound dog. So yeah, you feel like she's kind of fragile. And did you ever think about renaming this dog Rasputin at any point after all the things
I probably didn't know who Rasputin was at the time, but it's a pretty good name.
Yeah. Okay, so news of the week. We had this, I think this was last night. You texted the Croniolos and I, and you said, theoretically, if you were going to do a podcast in a week when there was absolutely no news, what would you talk about? And we came up with
asking for a friend, right?
Asking for, of course, whoever these people might be that talk about Austin FC every week. Got some ideas, and then we got news from Tom Bogert and officially from Austin FC this morning that Zardes was having his contract bought out by the club, not freeing up any of Anthony Precourt's money, but freeing up cap space and a senior roster space for 2025 for Austin FC. I don't have the release up. Can you go through the details?
Yeah, I don't have it up either, but I think I know them by memory here. So Zardes was guaranteed through this upcoming 2025 season. What a buyout is, just as a refresher, we went through this not long ago with Emiliano Rigoni, but the club is essentially saying, we're going to pay you to go away. And so Gyasi Zardes still gets all the money that he was owed throughout the rest of his guaranteed contract. But Austin FC now gets to use all of his salary budget space, his roster spot, anything else that he was taking up, spots or money that he's taking up that the club couldn't use before to sign new players. They can now use it to sign new players. Are there any other details that you think I'm missing here?
No, I think you hit on them. I think the one question that came up, because with the Rigoni thing, we mentioned and other folks did that that teams, at least at this point right now, only get one buyout per year. So Rigoni was the 2024 buyout, and so people were wondering, well, does this kind of get 24 or 25? Everybody thought it was 25, and then the headline says Austin FC exercises 2025 buyout option on Gyasi Zardes. So maybe just before we get into sort of all of our feelings about it, who else might Austin have used the buyout on? I mean, it seems like the absolute no-brainer call at this point in time, unless some other really expensive person got hurt or something. But like, feels like one that was, if we knew that Austin was going to make this move, it was one that was coming sooner or later. Like, this is the most obvious contract that the club would buy out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about this a while back, and all of the other players that we mentioned that even could be, I think like Leo Vysen ended up being one that we mentioned. But like Julio Cascante is one of the other contracts that we aren't terribly fond of. But Julio Cascante, I think with like a few other pieces built around him, would be a serviceable center back, like a serviceable starting center back in this league. Gyasi Zardes is not that right now. And so, yeah, I think if they were going to do it, it was always going to be Gyasi.
Yeah, and I feel like with those two moves, Austin has got rid of the two absolutely, without a doubt, worst contracts that were on the club in 2024. And while, like you said, like every team's gonna have bad contracts. Like we're getting better. Our worst contract is better than it was a year ago, definitely.
Right.
And I would say right before Roto came in, Austin was signing progressively worse contracts. So it's great to see the tide turn on that one for sure. So, I mean, I think we should talk about our emotions about. I want to start with my emotions about it. One, like, great dude, good dad, constant professional, solid teammate. We had the chance to interview him when he came to the club when he signed, and like I fell in love with the guy and sort of bought into the hype because I liked him so much, or bought into the hope that he would turn his career around in Austin because I liked him so much. But it's like a soccer move that had to happen in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, but he's 33 years old. He's making $1 million, which is a big chunk of the salary budget space. And then he still had one more guaranteed season. In 2023, he scored 6 goals, had 2 assists. In 2024, had 3 goals and 2 assists. It's just not good enough. Like, on a different roster where you've got a lot of other guys contributing, a lot of other guys carrying that weight, maybe some cheap guys carrying that weight, maybe you can afford to ride this one out. But in Austin's current state, they cannot. And that's not good enough to save your spot there.
So I think the next place to go is this tweet that you sent we call him Skeets. This post on Blue, I'm not going to. This post that you sent on Blue Sky, maybe on Twitter also, about this being a big sign of ambition from Austin FC. So I'd like you to unpack that a little bit before we go on.
Yeah, I think we talked about this on a recent show, is that if Austin FC uses their buyout, it's going to be on Gyasi Zardes. But the big question was, will Austin FC use the buyout? Because this is money that they are spending. They're paying people to do the job twice. So they're essentially paying Osman Bukhari and Emiliano Rigoni to play winger for Austin FC in 2024, but they can only put one of those guys on the field. In 2025, they're paying Josh Wolf and Nico Estevez to coach the team, but only one of them is actually there coaching. And if they were to do this buyout, they're going to pay Gyasi Zardes and someone else to play striker, and only one of them can actually play. And so the question was, is the ownership group tired of doing this? Tired of just throwing their money down the drain, essentially? You could imagine a scenario where they just tell Burrell, like, okay, we've done this a couple of times for you. we're done. You got to use what you have, see the rest of these contracts out, and then we'll start spending some money once these contracts are over. I think the fact that that's not how it went, that they told Burrell, yes, you can buy out this other contract, that's really good news for Austin FC fans who we're all hoping for a turnaround this season, hoping that they can make some big moves. We had the 4 senior roster spots available, which is quite a bit of space, but we almost need 3 out of those 4 to be starters in order for this team to actually be different next year. Now it's 5 spots that we can spend it on. That increases your chances of either, okay, we're going to buy a couple of guys that we think might work. Then you have a greater chance of one of those working and one of them being a depth piece. Now you can maybe be a little bit more risky with that 5th pick, or maybe bring in, we'll talk about free agency a little bit later. Maybe there is room for free agent pick or someone out of contract within MLS now. Whereas before this, there was really not room for that. It had to be DPs and U22s or high level players. Now you have a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add to that is, I mean, I know it's like a fool's errand to be like, oh, just one more, just one, we'll get one more of these and everything will be okay. But it feels like the Rigoni deal, the Wolf contract, and now Jossie like is the one more, and because I saw this other somebody posted online, I wish I could remember who it was, talked about how there's very few pre-Roto extensions left in this club, and none of them are huge. So I feel like this it's showing ambition, but also this is like the last move that you can see the ownership group making. Right now, it's like Roto's deal to stand or fall on his own at this point. It's like they have definitely shown this commitment and this ambition, and one can only hope that he continues to make the good decisions and the results come, because I mean, I don't think there's another. It's a whole rebuild. If there's like another set of contracts or deals or coaches or whatever that come through that like need to be bought out, then I feel like that's probably the end of the Burrell regime in Austin.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And there are other moves that could be made, but they're hard moves to make, and they would be, again, they would be Burrell's moves to make. And for an example of what I'm talking about is like a trade. If you could talk someone into taking one of these undesirable contracts off your books, that would be a plus. But yeah, I think you're right that if we were worried they were done before this one, but the ownership group is almost certainly done after this one, as far as bailing out space for Burrell to then fill on his own.
Yeah, and one of the other things I saw online today was just the timing of it. And I think everybody agreed that earlier is better. Obviously, it gives the club more flexibility. The question became a little bit, I don't know if this is necessarily an either or, but this is a little bit of the way it was presented. Do we think that Austin did this out of sort of the kindness of its own heart to give Jossie Zardes as much time as possible to find a soft landing space? Or do we think Austin FC did it because like the next guy up has already been identified and they need the money in order to be able to bring that person on board?
Yeah, I've seen this floated around a bit. I think if let's explore the scenario of waiting until we've identified someone else. I think in that scenario, you're saying that if they don't find someone else, that they're okay with Zardes being around in 2025. And I don't know that that was ever the case. And so I don't know that the timing matters that much as far as like finding a replacement. They're saying, we're going to find a replacement. We need this spot. Let's open it up now. That's the way I view it. I don't think it had anything to do with finding, like, they do have someone lined up now and they're making an offer. Maybe they do, but I don't think this necessarily means that. I think if they had nobody in mind, they still might have done it now. Partially, I've seen this theory floated just to a nice thing to do for Jossie Zardes, and like letting him have a full off season to find a new club and kind of do whatever he needs to do. But also just open up your books now. So that way you're not left wondering, okay, we want to do this, but then this needs to happen and this needs to happen. It's like, no, let's do it now. Let's open up as much space as we can right now. So that way when we are negotiating and we're battling 2 different clubs for this striker from wherever, that we don't have to wait on anything else. We're ready now. We have the spot, we have the money, we have everything we need prepared to get this deal over the line.
Yeah, I think that one makes the most sense. I think there's look, we all want to see green smoke and a big, a big international signing, a giant, handsome Frenchman from somewhere who plays forward, or whoever it might be. But yeah, I don't know if there's a lot to that other than wishful thinking.
Anything else on the Zardes buyout before we move on?
I don't have anything else. I'm ready to take a break. You want to take a break and talk about the week ahead and some other Austin FC news?
Yeah, we've got a big week ahead. We've kind of alluded to this in a few of the most recent shows. This is a pretty big week in MLS offseason. There's quite a few different dates coming up. So we're going to walk through each one of those and talk about what it means, because we know that MLS stuff is difficult to navigate at times. So we'll talk about what it is, what Austin FC could do in it, and then we'll also kind of take a trip down memory lane and talk about what Austin FC has done in the past with some of these mechanisms. So hang tight. We'll be right back with that. Moontower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FEF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FEF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FEF.law to find out what makes FEF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FEF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balance. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage for your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Amplify Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower-soccer. All right, we are back. As we mentioned before the break, this coming week is chock full of MLS roster building mechanisms and dates. And so we're going to kind of walk through each one of those, tell you what it means, tell you what Austin FC has done in the past, and tell you what we think they could do this year. So let's start with, I guess today's half-day trade window, right?
Yes.
This is today, Monday, December 9th, as we're recording this. Half-day trade window, it's 4 hours where clubs are able to make trades within the league. And the reason that exists is because the expansion draft is coming up later this week. And so, as we talked about last week, you can only protect so many players. And so if there's some players you aren't able to protect, then this gives you the opportunity to make some moves and kind of free up some of those spots that you weren't going to protect so that you now don't have to protect them and now have some either money or players or whatever it is coming in for those assets. So I think it started at 8 a.m. Central Time. It was 8 to noon Central Time. And so I was checking Tom Bogert tweets, checking Austin FC tweets, and nothing came for a while. And then about mid-morning, we got a video of Mikael Dessler cooking. And I was like, oh, this is a bad sign. We're not going to get anything today if they're posting this.
Yeah, and that's what it ended up being. So it was a very quiet day for Austin FC, which, I mean, it's not surprising. You've got to kind of have the right matchup between like something you have and something somebody else wants. So I would say this window, not terribly surprising that Austin did not make any moves in this 4 hours.
Yeah, and there were only a handful of moves, period, throughout the whole league. Some kind of big ones, but not a ton overall anyway. So this is leading into Wednesday's expansion draft. So we talked about that a lot last week. And then Mike and Steph on Swoon Tower also picked their own expansion draft on last week's show as well. Theirs was a little bit different than ours.
Yeah, and you posted this, I think, on Blue Sky and Twitter both. So do you want to go through maybe the logic? Well, I guess, what was it, Gam versus Gams? Was that the biggest difference between the two?
Yeah, and I stole that from a quote from Steph on their episode last week that I titled, the subtitle of our list was talking about that Gam. and the subtitle of theirs was Steph's quote, which is talking about them gams. And so they chose based on a combination of personality, vibes, and style. We're working off of trade value and on-field contributions, and then how much we think they're actually at risk of San Diego even wanting their contract. With the Zardes news, like, he's scratched off of our unprotected list, but we didn't have him protected anyway. And so ours kind of stands. I think the only place, like, they're going to announce on, is it Tuesday or Wednesday when they announce the protected list?
The list of players will be released on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, okay.
Yeah, on Tuesday, the list of players eligible will come out. When
that list is out, the only thing that, and I could be wrong about this and surprised for other things, but we talked about CJ Fodre being a Generation Adidas player. I could see a reality where they finagle his roster spots and move him into roster spots 21 through 24, which is the other qualification for being automatically protected. So I wouldn't be surprised if it pops up on Tuesday and CJ is automatically protected and we're able to shift Stephen Cleveland into that last spot. Is that, I don't know that we got into this. Is that who you would move up, or is there someone else you would move into that 12th spot if CJ doesn't need to be protected?
I could move him up because I think you talked about this last week, he's one of the only guys from among the non-protected list that holds any value, right? So you can keep him. And we've seen some moves just this offseason on, like, people picking up keepers or keepers moving around. Like, keepers move around every offseason. And right, like, there's sometimes a guy just needs the right opportunity, like Brad Stuver bouncing around the league for forever. Cleveland's got a history, so it seems like he would be a person that would have some value. So, yeah, I can see that. I can see him being the guy that gets picked up if Fodre drops out.
Yeah, and we'll get into some Swoon Tower talk here in a bit. But from the joyless nerd perspective, I think anybody but Cleveland on our list, so we'll read through the whole list of unprotected first-team players. Stephen Cleveland, Leo Weisen, Julio Cascante, Jean Coleman, and Jimmy Farkerlund. I think you could argue that 3 of those guys would be blessings if they took them, right?
Yeah, it's entirely right. Yeah, it's the contracts versus return for sure.
Talking about Swoon Tower, though, I know that Jossie Zardes is a big hit to their list. Julio Cascante would be a big hit. I think they named him number 1 on their list is like most important to protect. Is looking through the Swoon Tower lens. Do you agree with their list? And there's anyone that you would switch in?
They would switch out. Well, I guess I'm a little bit surprised Swoon Tower, although I don't know who would replace. Okay, I'm a little bit surprised that Jean is out and Jimmy is in. That's where I would go with, like.
Oh, they love Jimmy, though. I think I would keep Jimmy over Jean as well.
Okay. Then I don't know.
He's got all those cool outfits before the games, and he dances in the locker room.
That's true.
I have a hard time taking off my joyless nerd glasses, too, looking at Mikel Dessler unprotected there. But if I'm playing by the rules of the game and basing it on personality, vibes, and style, I don't know that he makes the cut.
I mean, that's very fair. I thought one thing I wanted to add, because we saw a question about this today, personality. We did make one of our picks based upon personality on the Moon Tower list, that being Sebastian Driussi's emo designated player personality. So that could be part of it too. And then one other note I had, because I written this on there about, like, JB's comments on Blue Sky, and that is, I would love to follow everybody back that follows us on Blue Sky. I'm trying to do my best. If you would have a post, something about Austin or Austin FC in your bio, or like a picture, that would be super helpful. Like, there's plenty of people who I know are Austin FC fans because I happen to know the exact name who I follow back, even though they have not made a single post. There's no picture. They have no bio. But, like, it makes it a lot easier if we can somehow tell that you're tangentially related to Austin. So, sorry for anybody I've missed. We'll go back in and try to do that. But just help me out while we're trying to find people to follow, because so far it's been a great conversation, and great engagement early on, like during the off season, when you expect people to be paying the least amount of attention possible to what's going on around Major League Soccer.
Yeah, you got to keep those timelines clean, though.
Yeah, that's right. Can't have any bots up there.
All right, so yeah, Tuesday we'll get those lists of all of the players that are protected or unprotected from any team. Then on Wednesday, we'll actually get the real expansion draft. I remember whenever Austin did it, it takes almost no time because there's no one else picking, so you're not waiting. The order doesn't really matter. And so oftentimes, like, you'll get, okay, this person was picked, and then 30 seconds later, this person's been traded to NYCFC or whatever. So it's just like it goes by really quickly. So as much work as we spent on it in 2020, whenever we went through it the first time, I imagine there's a bunch of folks in San Diego doing the same thing. But at the end of it, they're going to have a few players to talk about. We will, in all likelihood, have exactly the same roster we did.
Yeah, so San Diego FC will be permitted 3 minutes for each selection, no timeouts. And no trades are permitted for the 2024 draft. So at most, if they go down to the wire on every single pick, is a 15-minute expansion draft.
All right, so that's on Wednesday. On Thursday, free agency officially opens. So free agency is in many ways like what you are used to with any other American sport that you follow. Players out of contract, they're able to go wherever they want. In MLS, under the current rules, there's a slight caveat to that where you only qualify for free agency, true free agency, if you are at least 24 years old, you've played at least 5 years in Major League Soccer. We'll get into what happens if you don't meet those requirements in the next step, but let's stick with free agency here for a bit. Let's look back at Austin's free agency history. I wasn't sure, like, if I'd have actually thought about it, I would have been able to come up with a list of players, and it's maybe a little longer than I thought, but we do have that list in front of us here. This is more or less chronological order. Matt Beasler, Aaron Big Celery Schoenfeld, Diego Fagundes, Hector Jimenez, Felipe Martins, Maxi Urruti, Ethan Finley, Will Bruin, Jossie Zardes, and Diego Rubio. And then we also, we can maybe count Brendan Hines-Ike. I don't think he was technically an MLS free agent because I don't think he had played 5 years in MLS. So I think he fits some other mechanism. And then Hader Obrian also was not a true free agent. And so we're not going to count either of those guys in this conversation. But overall, like, quite a few solid players or good locker room guys to bring in, but not a ton of super high-end players coming out of this free agency pool in the last few years. For Austin, anyway.
No, for Austin, yeah. I mean, if you ignore Diego's 2022 season, you can almost say there's, like, not a player that exceeded probably whatever he paid for. I guess Maxi, although Maxi had a pretty good year that year too, but, like, there's a lot of people that cost a fair amount of money because they're, like, MLS veterans and known commodities that didn't produce a whole lot for Austin FC in this group, particularly, Jossie Zardes, who we just referenced.
Yeah, I was trying to think of, like, who are the best, like, 2 or 3 free agents that Austin FC has brought in. I think number one has to undeniably be Diego Fagundes, even with, so looking at his numbers, I think he was 7 goals, 5 assists in the first year, 6 goals, 15 assists in the second year. And then in the half season he played in 2023, 2 goals, 2 assists. So with the really poor 2023 he had and the way that everything went down, I still think it's hard to deny that he's our best free agent that we've ever signed.
Yeah, I think the only other way that you get anything else is if you extrapolate out Matt Beasler not getting a season-ending concussion, because the 2021 Austin start defensively was a really good run, and Austin in the first season went clearly downhill as soon as that Matt Beasler went out, but we're talking about a half a season there. And
yeah, and that team was never going to be good, but he was, for those 20 games he played, he was one of the bright spots on the team for that half of the season.
And he will still forever have the best player enter a video with his McConaughey impression that he did. And if for some reason, well, if you're a normal person and haven't been following this show for long enough to remember that, go look it up. It's amazing.
So second, I put Ethan Finley for number 2, 12 goals, 10 assists. I think he has quite a few more appearances than any of the other options. And then after that, it's like it gets kind of tough. After that, you could say Aruti for that one decent season he had. You could say Felipe just for
Vibes,
bringing the
shithousery.
laminator
Yeah.
thing in 2022 and all that stuff, but it drops off pretty steeply after that. I know we talked about free agency a couple of weeks ago and how we are like Austin doesn't have the space to sign a free agent. We essentially have to sign DPs, U22s, high TAM players, like real difference makers are the only option. And looking at this free agency list, I don't know that there's any really big difference makers that are going to be on the right price and the right age, right health level, right production from this last. Like there's just like a lot of guys who might be good under different circumstances. Now the circumstances have changed. We went from 4 senior spots to 5 senior spots. There is a bit more flexibility. That being said, like, are there any of the free agents that caught your eye that you would maybe be curious for Austin FC to revisit and maybe take a look at now that there is that one extra roster spot?
Yeah, I'll start with 2 names. I mean, both veterans. So, both going back to how Austin's paid for guys that maybe haven't necessarily lived up to production, like maybe fall into those rules, but help plug holes. I mean, Albert Rusnak is 31 now, I think.
I think that's right.
Made a bunch of money last year as a DP. Probably not going to get the same again. Fills a position of need. Has shown some success in the past, but he's like one of those guys that always seems on the edge of putting it together and like never really does. So there's definitely a downside risk with him, but I feel like that's mitigated a little bit given the fact that Austin has more salary flexibility. So he'd be one. How do you feel about him?
I don't know. I'm not super high on that idea. I think I wouldn't be like upset about it, but it just feels like we could maybe, if we're going to pay somebody that much money, I would maybe back Burrell to do better on the open market because, I don't think he'll need to be a DP on this next contract, but he'll still, like, he's been good enough for Seattle that he'll be able to get a pretty decent return and still make quite a bit of money in this league. So, I would be okay with it if there were some other big moves around him and this wasn't like the big move, but it would make me a little nervous until those big moves came if like say Rusnak was announced next week.
And that's like the story of the history of every player signing that we've ever made on this show is like, this could be a good signing if a better signing is coming later.
And they never do.
To date, that has never had. And then my other person, I will stay in the midfield. I will stay with the guys older and say, Ilie Sanchez fills a position of need. He's 34, still pretty productive for LAFC. We see him all the time on Apple TV, so part of me can't even decide whether like I'm actually excited by him or I've just been brainwashed by seeing his contract. But when you think about somebody who has a skill set that's slightly different from what we have with Wolf and Pereira, adds a veteran presence, could be a solid leader. Like that's a guy that I wouldn't mind seeing come to Austin and think he would be affordable-ish.
Yeah, and he still started 24 games, played over 2,000 minutes for LAFC, so he is getting a little older, but that is one that for the right price, I would certainly be interested in. We definitely need some more midfielders. We need some depth. We need some veterans. We don't have any like veterans in central midfield at the moment. So for the right price, I wouldn't be upset about that one. Also in the midfield, one that kind of caught my eye is Jackson Ewell. I don't like, again, this would be with the caveat of I would want some other big signings outside of that to make me feel good about it. But let's say we do bring in a DP striker and then some U22 players in midfield and on the wing or something like that. To have Jackson Ewell thrown into that mix, like you could do a lot worse than that. I do think Ewell will have suitors. Like he's been pretty good in this league for the last handful of years. I think there will be other people interested. So not sure what the price would be. I think he made just over or maybe close to $1 million this year. I don't necessarily want him for that, but if we could get him for less than that, I think it's worth looking at.
And I think he's 27. I think he's the only of the guys I looked at. I think he was the only guy on the underside of 30 among the big name free agents that are available.
And I think this last contract he got was when he was still getting called into U.S. national team camps fairly regularly. So you say like, okay, he's 27. He's not going to take less money, but maybe he would, given the kind of the reason why he got a bigger contract last time. Some other names here, like Joseph Martinez, Raul Ruidiaz, Johnny Russell, Joao Paulo. These are all guys who probably a little too old, a little too injury prone for me to feel very good about any of them. I honestly love Johnny Russell, just like the fighter, the leader that he is. But he seems to have lost a step. I think he's only going to continue to do that. Also, don't know how much money he's going to want, or if he's going to want to stay in MLS at all. So that one probably doesn't work out. Is any of those other three, Martinez, Ruidiaz, Joao Paulo, any of those catch your eye?
No, those guys all seem like guys who are nice to have players in rotational spots on squads that are deep and compete. Like they're either in LA or New York City or Miami, right? Like coastal teams that can splash money around. They can have somebody like that. That would be like the best situation for them. Not that they will necessarily end up there, and maybe they'll all be San Jose Earthquakes because Brutus Arenas is getting like all the MLS old timers together. I don't know about that, but not very excited about any of those.
Yeah, like I think 2 years ago, I would have maybe killed to have Joao Paulo on this team, but he started 16 games, played 1,200 minutes, had 2 assists this season. So I think he was injured for a lot of it. He's in his 30s. I don't know exactly how, older than 32, I think, maybe several years older than that. But yeah, again, been burned by this too many times. Can't do it again. There's one other name that's available, and this is a guy who Austin traded not long ago, and we said like we don't think he should be traded because he's bad. He should be traded because he's not great, and somebody will take him. Somebody will give him money for us, and we need money. So Nick Lima gets sent out. Would you take Nick Lima on a smaller contract now that he's going to be free?
Well, that's interesting. But that Nick Lima is now 2 years older than he was before.
Yeah.
It's not an extreme position of need. I mean, at the exact right price, sure. But I don't feel like that. I don't see Nick Lima coming back through that door. I do think that shows that deal was a good deal. The fact that Austin got something for him, he went to New England, and then New England let him walk after the end of one season, means that Austin probably maximized the value for him. But no, would not be very excited about seeing Nick Lima back in Austin FC jersey.
Yeah, totally agree. That was kind of a troll pick into this list, but
love it.
All right, so that's on Thursday. Also on Thursday, MLS waivers opens. I think this is one we can mostly ignore. Waivers is like people who, it's like, I think it was if you're 22 or younger and have been in MLS for less than a year. So there's almost no players that even fit the mold. And then the ones that do, you probably don't want. And so probably nothing's going to happen there.
Landon, I just want to read this because this is the most, like, if I fell into this criteria, I'd be so sad. The parameters are players whose options are not exercised, who are not subject to first right of refusal, and who are not eligible for free agency or entry drafts. Like players who nobody wants for any possible reason ever. You get your little half day thing there.
Yeah. I like, and the thing is, like, I want to look on the list and see who they are, but chances are I've never heard of any of them.
Right.
Okay, and then so let's skip that. Let's go to Friday. Friday is when re-entry process begins. And so we talked about free agency being the requirements of 24 years old, 5 years in MLS. Re-entry is where you go if you don't meet those requirements. And so that means if you are under 24 or are over 24 and haven't been here for 5 years, this is where you go. The example for Austin is Jader Obrian met this. He'd only been in Dallas for 2 years, I think. They did not pick up his option year. He did not qualify for free agency, so he goes into the reentry process. Austin FC, I believe, traded, was it Toronto? They traded someone to get the first pick so that they could get Obrian. And that seems like a pretty good move at this point, right? So again, it's often kind of slim pickings in the re-entry draft, so I wouldn't expect a lot to come out of this. But we did get Obrian, so it's not a zero chance. There could be some players kind of sneak into this mechanism that Austin could be looking at.
Yeah, and I think just for further context, if you look at the total list of re-entry draft picks, if I remember right, there's like 7 or 8 players, maybe 10, like selected across the whole league. So again, not a lot, but there's potential that you might find the right guy that might fit a need there that Roto wants.
Yeah, and so that starts on Friday, but I believe it goes through next week because they'll go multiple rounds of it. And again, it's all boring and doesn't happen that much, so we're not going to get into all the details. If it happens, we'll talk about it next week. But for now, we're going to skip it. That's all that's going to be happening this week. And so, again, there's a lot of different things happening, a lot of things that could or might happen to or for Austin, but also there's a chance that nothing happens and everything is exactly the same next week.
Yeah, and I feel like that with, Austin had very many, a lot of different permutations of this club. And obviously the first year when Austin had no players and we were building a roster, like if they were getting players in every single one of these mechanisms. And I think last year, like maybe December, like Obrian may have been the only player that came in because free agency is open for a while. So while it opens soon, you can easily sign free agents in January, February, or right up till the season starts. So like that is not a short window like some of the other players are. So I would say more likely than not, don't expect us to have 5 green smoke tweets and like new players to talk about come next week. If we get 1 or 2, that would be awesome.
Yeah. And then the last roster mechanism of 2024 is going to be next Friday, not this week, but the following week, December 20th, and that's the MLS Super Draft. This is the college draft. So we'll probably spend some more time on that next week. The MLS College Showcase, which is kind of similar to the NFL Combine, where they bring in all of the prospects, all of the technical staff from different clubs, get to watch them perform, play in a game, do various like performance tasks. After that is often when all of the like Top Drawer Soccer will release a mock draft. Ivis Galarsep with SBI Soccer will release a mock draft. There's been it seems more and more places will have some like mock draft kind of things going on. We're not going to pretend to be experts on college soccer, so we often get at least a baseline knowledge through those mock drafts that the people who do know college soccer are putting up. All that being said, I've spent a lot of time scouting players last year just for Burrell to essentially trade all of our picks away. And we had a precedent today. Philadelphia Union traded every pick for the next 3 years.
I love that,
to the Colorado Rapids. And so, I mean, I would not be surprised if something similar came out about Austin. Like, I just don't know how much Burrell is going to value the draft. We can get into that more next week, but it'll be interesting to see. And I am probably not going to do as much research on these players, not only because of that, but also Austin has a lower pick this year and probably aren't going to be in the contention for any of these Generation Adidas players.
Right. Yeah. Austin will pick 12th this year if Austin stays with that, because like you just mentioned, some front offices don't value these picks and very well trade down to people who do. So I wouldn't be surprised at all for that to happen.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with some more Austin FC news, including some personnel changes in the front office, and then some news about MLS following Don Garber's State of the League address before MLS Cup final. So hang tight. And we're also going to have a player that Austin FC is linked to. I watched a little bit of film on this guy, so have a little bit of an update there as well.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. The Sage Wilson team is made up of Austin experts who are client-focused and have over 30 years of combined real estate experience.
If you or someone you know are in need of Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, talk to our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
Moon Tower Soccer's premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, who helps clients in the public affairs space from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and Austin FC in their rebuilding offseason. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We have a few pieces of Austin FC news, and one that I'm going to go ahead and call a rumor, which is a player out of Sweden that we've been linked to. We'll get to that here in a second, but let's start with some of the personnel changes. I know, like, you were on the Dave Tinney thing a few weeks back, but we finally got confirmation that Dave Tinney, who was the director of high performance here at Austin FC for the last, was he here all 4 years?
Yeah, I believe it's since 2021 is when he came in. Yeah, and a former interviewee on the show.
That's right. So he was announced at Atlanta United today. He worked in Seattle, and so Garth Lagerwey is now the president at Atlanta. So not surprising that if he was leaving here to see him link back up with Lagerwey in Atlanta. The other is Terry Boss, who I can't remember the exact order of operations, but he was coach at Oregon State, the college program, then came to Austin FC 2, and then is he the one who was the set piece coach for the first team this season?
Yeah, so he was right.
I believe he was on the bench for the first team this year doing some type of assistant coaching.
Yep.
But he was announced at Lexington SC, which is a USL championship club. The only reason, like, we normally wouldn't talk about a second team or lower level coach moving on to a USL club, I think it's interesting because this is the first of the Josh Wolf staff that we've heard for sure isn't coming back. We talked about not long ago, like after Estevez was hired, that you could see a certain coach coming in and it being quite clear that he's going to wipe the whole slate clean and bring in an entirely new staff. With a guy like Estevez, who has a history in U.S. soccer, a history with guys that Josh Wolf knows, like maybe there's some of these guys that are on this staff that he trusts, that he likes, that he wants to keep around. I still think the majority, if not all, of Josh Wolf's staff will probably be gone by the start of the 2025 season. This is the first one that we've seen definitively. So I imagine we'll get some more stuff like this trickling out. Like if some of them do stay, you think like maybe one or two of the staff stay and everyone else is going to get replaced anyway?
Yeah, I think that total, it would be that. If you had, I mean, gosh, I don't know. I was going to ask you a question about like if you could keep a guy, who would you keep? But I would just say like, I wouldn't mind Preston Burpo staying around out of everybody.
Yeah. That's the only one I have like any knowledge of anyway. Like we've had him on the show also, but like goalkeeping is not a thing we've had trouble with. I don't know what their relationship is like, but it seems like the few like in the wild interactions I've seen Brad Stuver and Preston interacting, they seem to like each other and respect each other. So that might be one. And again, we're making this up. That might be one where you see like, okay, one of our best players is really attached to this coach. Maybe we'll keep him around because I don't have a guy that I was going to bring in and I've interviewed him. I liked him. Let's keep him around. I could see something like that happening, but I would also not be surprised if 100% of the technical staff were replaced.
Yeah. And okay, so now is this part of the show where we become an LA Galaxy show because it would be way more fun to do that. So LA Galaxy wins their wins the MLS Cup. I saw a lot of folks happy for Diego Fagundes and congratulating him on that outcome. I mean, it's cool because his parents still live here, right? So he still comes back here. It seems like a lot. So there's still a local connection for Diego. So good for him. And he got to play 28 minutes or something like that in the final. And then we get this like Will Kuntz to ATX like paragraph. Was that in a story that you sent me over today? That was in a story about the build of the LA Galaxy, right?
It was like Charles Boehm, who writes for MLS, took a clip from, I can't remember the guy's name now, but I think it was like a local LA reporter who got this out of somewhere, but saying that Will Kuntz, who is the LA Galaxy sporting director, worked at LAFC, wasn't brought back for some reason or another, and then got the job at the Galaxy, went from not making the playoffs to completely turning this team around and winning MLS Cup. Will Kuntz was apparently, according to the story, approached by Austin FC, and they were trying to get him. And I think we brought him up on the show because it was news that he left LAFC. It's like, okay, the Reyna stuff had kind of just happened. So it was like, maybe we'll be in the running for this guy. And apparently we were trying to make it happen. And this is one of the things I think is most interesting about this story. Kuntz was talking to Austin. His wife is also like a high level executive in whatever field she works in.
Wait, it's the executive director and regional controller of West Coast Real Estate Investment for JP Morgan, which I assume means she makes a lot more money than he does. I imagine being in charge of real estate investment on the West Coast for JP Morgan probably pays a boatload of money.
Yeah. And so she apparently wasn't interested in moving at all, or at the very least moving to Texas. And so that was kind of killed in its tracks. I think that's interesting because of things that I've seen online from fans in the past and things that I've seen after this LA Galaxy win, saying, okay, the Galaxy were bad for several years in a row. Kuntz comes in, turns it around in one season, and they're great. Why can't Austin do this? And part of the reason is, go back to the name of the city I said that we were talking about. It's LA. That is part of why Austin can't do this. And that's not the only reason. There's been some really bad decisions, lots of bad decisions. We just talked about quite a few of them. And so I'm not saying this to, I think I get accused when I say stuff like this of not wanting to be critical of the club. We were just critical of the club a lot. So I hope my record stands here as saying there is always going to be an advantage in certain markets. And LA is one of those markets where you get this guy who happens to be married to a high-powered executive who's not moving. She's not moving to Austin. She's not going to do it. Or whatever player, Marco Reus, whoever it is, Gareth Bale, there's going to be players that we are never going to be in contention for. Or if we are, and they're also in contention, they're going to have the advantage on us. And so, not to say that we can't be good, that will never be good, but there are certain advantages that we will never have.
Yeah, and I think there's a way to build a club knowing that lack of advantage that Austin should follow and Austin hasn't, right? And you see that Philadelphia can do that. Seattle can do that. There are teams that are successful. Portland has done that for a long time, year after year after year. It's just not bringing in big flashy name dudes and executives and things like that. It's it's going to be a slower but a longer term build.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you know? I did not watch Don Garber's State of the League. It's something I missed in our probably dog related escapades over the week. So
I didn't watch it either. I read I read the Athletics
highlights.
recap of it, which was Tenorio and someone else wrote about it, and I just read their recap of it. But there's a few interesting things coming out of it. I'd say most of it disappointing.
In that, it's mostly situation normal, no big changes.
Yeah, so I think two of the kind of neutral news things is that MLS will take a break for the 2026 World Cup. I felt like it would be an extremely unserious move from the league if they didn't. So not really surprising, but good to get confirmation. They will also have, the wording was strange, a specific break for Club World Cup, which made me think that maybe the teams that are in it, which I believe are Seattle and Miami, will take a break, but not every team will be on break for the entirety of it. And then this is the part I was talking about that is disappointing, is questions about changes to roster spend rules. And Garber, two quotes that I pulled out of this were regarding like increasing the ability to spend more money. He said, I wouldn't put it in the category of significant. And then another quote, I don't anticipate anything significant happening in the next couple of years. And so for anyone wishing, which I know there are a lot of us, that MLS is going to loosen the purse strings, let the ambitious owners spend more money, that it seems like that's not really going to happen anytime soon.
No, and this reminds me, we also got a Don Garber contract extension announcement, I think through 2027, fairly recently. So if you're waiting for the next guy to come in and blow the whole thing up and make a change, that's probably also not going to happen.
Yeah, I got into some interesting conversations about that. It's like Don Garber, I know, is not popular with a lot of fans, but to the people that he works for, he has been extremely successful.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm sure he's super popular with the owners, right? Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's not surprising that he's been extended. I know it's probably disappointing to some people, but Garber deserves a lot of credit for the health of this league, the fact that it still exists. And I think there's a lot of people who would like for new leadership to come in and push the envelope a little bit more, progress the league a little bit faster. But the people who hired him, the people who extended that contract, he's doing exactly what they want him to do. So yeah, not surprising at all.
Yeah, and then we've got some mystifying. Well, we got news on the Leagues Cup, that being that it will continue in some form, but he was a bit non-committal on that, and we had gotten comments out of I think Philadelphia and Cincinnati that seemed to make it seem like that maybe the tournament wouldn't happen, and then
well, just that. So Ernst Tanner in Philadelphia
right?
said that we would not be playing in it, and so I think there was like a clarifying question there of like, oh, it's not happening. Like, no, we're not playing in it. It's happening. We're not playing in it. And so everyone else was like, oh, that's weird. And so Chris Albright at Cincinnati used to work at Philadelphia. And so someone in their press conference asked him about it. And he said, oh, did he spill the beans? And that's just like such a telling quote, right? Of like, oh, we all know this is happening. He let the cat out of the bag. And so the speculation that I've seen is that the previous year's playoff teams, meaning the 2024 playoff teams, will take part in Leagues Cup, and it will be a more MLS versus Liga MX matchup kind of thing. And so there will be less or none of like MLS teams playing MLS teams, and it will be more Liga MX teams playing MLS teams, which I think is a positive move for that tournament. And then the teams that were not playoff teams, those teams will go into the US Open Cup. And so we'll have more MLS first teams playing in the Open Cup. I imagine the ones that are playing in Leagues Cup, their second teams will still play, kind of like we did this last year. This is all, none of this has been confirmed, but several people who likely know what's going on have hinted at that this is what the direction is going to be. So I wouldn't be surprised if that gets announced sometime in the not so distant future.
Yeah, and I think, I agree. And just back on your point on the Leagues Cup itself, like, I still don't know if I love it, but definitely the leagues competing against each other makes it for a way better format and tournament than what we ended up with later on in the tournament being like so many like MLS versus MLS matchups, where you had two like Liga MX teams playing in MLS City that were like not top tier clubs that nobody really cared about or whatever. Like that, the old format of the tournament was not great, and so it's good to see a change if we're going to continue to have it, and hopefully it makes for a more interesting format.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest complaint from a lot of people, is that it's too long. There's too many games that nobody cares about. Hopefully, and I'm not saying this is the perfect format for it, but it is a better format than what we've had, that it'll be shorter, it'll be more concentrated, there will be more compelling matchups more often within it. And then more MLS teams playing an Open Cup. I know there's going to be a lot of people, probably including myself, that would like to see a more extreme version of this, where Open Cup is put into a bit more prominence, that Leagues Cup isn't so disruptive to the MLS season. But I think this is a good step in the right direction at the very least.
Yeah, well, let's go on to. I've got one more bit of news. Wait, okay. I want to save the player thing for last. That seems like the most fun thing to end the show on. Okay, so the one thing, because if anybody is still listening, it's probably him, Cam Kubek, team front office PR guy. Saw on Twitter they got engaged. I think it was over the weekend, if I remember right. So congratulations to Cam. Thanks to Cam for putting out player news on a Monday, so it happened before we recorded. I feel like the team has been way better about that this year.
So we're just deciding to unilaterally give Cam credit for this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all on Cam.
Okay.
Cam is making the decisions. Yeah, I'm sure Cam's the one that told Preco to open his pocketbook today and not tomorrow. So good for him on that. And then also, I just thought this was like a little bit interesting for some reasons. Like Austin FC got named the 2024 Mark Abbott MLS Club Award for Sponsorship Activation of the Year. One, because that is a giant mouthful. Two, it's cool that Austin FC has gotten all of their corporate partners involved in green initiatives. So this is for its Evergreen initiative in 2024, which had a lot of cleanups and water stations. Well, it's questions about the water. Maybe more water stations would be good for this. Supporting partners and just all the different stuff that Austin's doing on sustainability is cool and shows how like the club is reflective of Austin as a city. So I wanted to go on those two things before we talk about a player rumor.
This was in a list of other clubs getting announced for making good soccer teams.
Okay, that's fair.
It's very maybe not the one that we would have chosen, but at least we're on there.
Something.
We made the list.
It's something.
Okay, let's get to this player rumor. So there's been some, I'll call them rumors. They're pretty vague reports out of Sweden for a 21-year-old midfielder named Imam Janye. That's Jagne. Again, if there's green smoke, I'll learn how to say his name properly. But for now, this is going to have to be good enough. But yeah, 21-year-old central midfielder playing at Mjölby in Sweden, was born in the Gambia, raised in Sweden, has played for Swedish youth national teams. So he's been linked to Austin, Vancouver, Cincinnati, but then also some other of the bigger teams in Sweden. I watched a little bit of film on him. Like a really dynamic central midfielder, can rip a shot from distance. He like his 1-to-1 replacement would be like Owen Wolf, but maybe a bit more like nose for goal and like a bit more aggressive with just his mentality of playing. But then also maybe like feels a little bit like Yunus Musa for the national team when he plays in the midfield. Like not just like the most amazing dribbler, but good enough dribbler. Not the most amazing defender, but good enough defender, but just like has this dynamism on the ball and just this like really gritty, like energetic attitude. It would be an interesting signing to me. Again, Sweden is not like a super high level league. So, but there's been guys come from those types of league in Europe, come over and be successful in MLS. So, and he's 21 years old. So I think he would probably be one of those U22 spots if he came. All that said, the latest reports that I've seen are that Gothenburg in Sweden are the favorites to land him. So maybe all of this is kind of made up and his agent was using random MLS clubs to try to get him a better salary in Gothenburg. But yeah, it is the profile and the quality of the player would seem to make sense for what Austin needs.
Yeah, it's the time of the year where we're going to get, well, the time of the year, I guess they kind of happen all year long, but we get plenty of these. It's interesting to see when some of them come through. If there's any reality to it, even if Austin doesn't end up with it, like to your point, it's just good to know that this is the type of player that Austin might be looking at.
Yeah, and a similar profile to the Hercules guy out of Brazil as well, which it seems like there's been like quite a few like AI generated articles written about Austin FC's link to Hercules. So I don't know what to do with that one, but I haven't seen any humans talking about it lately. Anything else before we wrap up, Jeremiah?
No, let's wrap it up, man. I think that's it for this week.
All right. Well, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Come find us on the internet, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, not I guess we're on Facebook. I don't ever go on there, but I think some of our Instagram stuff pushes there
somehow.
YouTube, TikTok, Blue Sky, if I didn't already say that. And then check out the Patreon. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week with some Austin FC news. Hopefully some action happens this week, and then we'll be leading into the MLS Super Draft the following week. So until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Thank for nothing, see you never.
La gente
Oh my God.